My cruel husband stormed into the hospital room, his eyes blazing with fury. The air felt heavy as he marched toward me. "Enough of this drama," he shouted, his voice sharp and unforgiving. Before I could react, his hand swung through the air, landing a vicious slap across my face. My head snapped to the side, my vision blurring from the impact. But it didn't end there. Pain still lingered on my skin when suddenly, the door swung open. What happened next was even more painful. My name is Isabella Carter, and I am 39 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you that my life was perfect. I had everything: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a promising future. At least, that's what I thought. From the outside, my marriage looked like a dream. Nicholas Walker, my husband, was charming, successful, and well-spoken. People admired us, and I often heard comments about how lucky I was to have such a devoted partner. But behind closed doors, my reality was far from perfect. I had spent years convincing myself that I was happy, that the cracks in my marriage were normal, and that love meant sacrifice. I ignored the little signs, the dismissive remarks, the growing distance, the way he slowly took control over my life without me even realizing it. But nothing lasts forever. The illusion I had built around my marriage was about to shatter into pieces, revealing a truth I had tried so hard to ignore. And that's where my real story begins. I met Nicholas Walker at a charity event in Austin, Texas. The hall was filled with laughter, soft music playing in the background, and the clinking of champagne glasses. I wasn't particularly social, but I had been invited by a friend and decided to attend. That's when Nicholas approached me. He had an easy smile, confident posture, and an undeniable charm. "You don't look like you belong to this crowd," he joked, handing me a glass of lemonade. His voice was warm, his eyes filled with curiosity. From that moment, our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about books, travel, and life dreams. He was witty, attentive, and made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. After that night, Nicholas didn't waste time. He called me every morning, planned spontaneous dates, and showered me with attention. I had never met someone so determined to win my heart. His words felt like poetry, his actions like a fairy tale. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Weekend outings turned into road trips. Late-night talks became discussions about our future, and soon, I found myself falling deeply in love. 6 months into our relationship, Nicholas proposed during a candlelit dinner on a rooftop overlooking the city lights. As I looked at him, kneeling with a ring in his hand, I didn't hesitate. I said yes, believing I was stepping into a life of love and security. Little did I know, the man standing in front of me would soon become a stranger, and my perfect love story would turn into a nightmare. Our wedding was nothing short of magical. The ceremony took place in a charming garden venue just outside Austin, surrounded by close friends and family. I wore an elegant white gown, and Nicholas looked dashing in his tailored suit. As we exchanged vows, he held my hand tightly and promised to love me forever. For the first few months, he kept that promise. We moved into a beautiful home in the suburbs, and at his insistence, I left my job as an event planner to focus on building a life together. "I'll take care of everything," Nicholas said, his smile reassuring. "You just focus on making our home perfect." At first, I enjoyed it. I poured my energy into decorating, cooking, and making our home warm and inviting. Nicholas seemed to appreciate my efforts, bringing me small gifts and showering me with compliments. But as time passed, his warmth faded. The compliments turned into criticisms, and the affection I once adored was replaced with cold indifference. "Why is there dust on the shelves?" he snapped one evening, his eyes narrowing at me. "What do you even do all day?" I tried harder. I cleaned obsessively, cooked gourmet meals, and made sure everything was perfect. But no matter how much I did, it was never enough for Nicholas. His disapproval extended beyond household chores. If I voiced an opinion, he dismissed me. If I expressed an emotion, he called me dramatic. The man who once adored me had disappeared, replaced by someone who made me feel like a burden. Yet I stayed. I convinced myself it was a phase. I told myself that the man I had fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath the distance and anger. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was losing myself, piece by piece. Days turned into months, and the Nicholas I had once loved was gone. The charming, caring man who once held my hand and whispered sweet words had transformed into a cold, dismissive stranger. I woke up every morning dreading his presence. His sharp words cut deeper than any wound, and no matter what I did, I couldn't seem to please him. "Can't you do anything right?" he scoffed when I overcooked his dinner one evening. I apologized, again and again, believing that if I just tried a little harder, things would go back to the way they were. But they never did. Nicholas's control over my life tightened. He dictated what I wore, who I spoke to, and how I spent my time. If I wanted to visit my parents, he'd sigh and say, "You're a married woman now, Isabella. Your responsibilities are here." And if I tried to talk about my feelings, he'd roll his eyes and mutter, "Stop being so dramatic." His verbal jabs started small, but soon they became daily insults. "You're useless. You'd be nothing without me. You're lucky I married you." Each word chipped away at my confidence, and slowly, I started believing him. I became a shadow of the woman I once was, walking on eggshells, trying to avoid his anger, desperate to keep the peace. But peace never lasted for long. No matter how much I obeyed, Nicholas always found something to break me down. Yet I still held on. I told myself, maybe he's just stressed. Maybe he'll change. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't love. This was control. And I was trapped. It started as a small redness on my cheek. Nothing alarming. I assumed it was an allergic reaction and thought it would fade. But within days, the redness worsened, spreading across my face in painful, itchy blisters. The swelling became unbearable. Even the slightest touch felt like needles piercing my skin. I avoided looking in the mirror, hoping it would go away on its own. Nicholas noticed, but not with concern. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, his face twisted in disgust. "I think I need to see a doctor," I replied cautiously. He scoffed. "Do you think money grows on trees, Isabella? It's probably something you did to yourself. Stop overreacting." His words stung almost as much as the infection itself. But I knew I couldn't wait any longer. That night, I called my parents, Margaret and Henry Carter. The next morning, they arrived at my doorstep. The moment my mother saw me, her face went pale. "Oh my God, Isabella, why didn't you call us sooner?" Within an hour, they had me in the car, rushing to the hospital. The doctor's examination was brief, but serious. "You have a severe skin infection," he said. "If left untreated, it could spread and become life-threatening." Hearing those words made my stomach drop. Life-threatening? I was admitted immediately. For antibiotics, painkillers, and medical creams were started right away. My parents stayed by my side, their faces filled with worry. Nicholas did not come. For days, I waited, expecting him to at least check on me. Each time the hospital door opened, my heart hoped it was him, but it never was. That's when I finally understood. Nicholas didn't care. He never did. I had spent years bending over backward for a man who wouldn't even lift a finger for me. And yet, I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. It was my 6th day in the hospital. I was still weak, but the infection was improving. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. Then, the door burst open. Nicholas stormed in, his face twisted with rage. His eyes burned with fury as he took in the sight of me lying in the hospital bed, for still attached to my arm. "Enough of this nonsense," he shouted, marching toward me. I barely had time to react before his hand lashed out. The slap landed hard across my cheek, the impact so sudden that my head snapped to the side. A sharp sting spread across my face, my skin already tender from the infection. A gasp escaped me as the room spun, my heart pounding in shock. Before he could strike again, a nurse rushed in, followed by the hospital's security guard. "Sir, step away from the patient immediately," the nurse commanded, her voice firm. Nicholas turned toward her, his fists clenched. "She's faking this. She just wants attention, he barked. The security guard moved quickly, grabbing Nicholas's arm before he could move any closer. That's enough. You need to leave. Nicholas tried to shake him off. You can't do this. She's my wife. The nurse reached for my forearm, checking if the slap had disturbed the needle. You're not her doctor, and you're not in control here, she snapped. Someone call the police. Nicholas's face paled. Wait, what? The hospital staff refused to let him go. The security guard tightened his grip, while a nurse quickly dialed 911. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Mr. Walker, you're under arrest for assault and domestic violence, one of them stated, pulling out handcuffs. Nicholas's anger turned to disbelief. You're arresting me? For slapping my own wife? Yes, sir. And there's security footage to back it up. As the officers restrained him, Nicholas's eyes met mine. You'll regret this, Isabella, he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. But for the first time, I felt no fear. As they dragged him away, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. For the first time in years, Nicholas had no power over me. Nicholas's shouts echoed through the hospital corridor as the officers dragged him away. His threats, his anger, it no longer mattered. He was no longer in control. I sat there, still in shock, my face burning from the slap, my body trembling from the moment that had just unfolded. But for the first time, I felt safe. The head nurse approached me, concern in her eyes. Are you all right, Isabella? She asked, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. I nodded weakly. I think so. We've reported everything, she reassured me. There's no way he's walking away from this. A moment later, an officer returned to take my statement. I told them everything, how Nicholas had barged in, how he had slapped me, how he had called me a liar while I was lying helpless in a hospital bed. The security footage backed up every word. The officer gave me a small nod of reassurance. We're pressing charges. Given the evidence, he won't be walking free anytime soon. The weight of those words settled over me. Nicholas was no longer untouchable. That evening, my parents rushed to the hospital, their faces filled with worry. The moment my mother saw the red mark on my cheek, her hands trembled. He hit you, she whispered, horror in her voice. I nodded, and her face hardened. My father clenched his fists, his usual calm demeanor shattered. That man belongs in prison, he muttered. For the first time in years, I felt truly protected. Later that night, I received a final update. Nicholas had been officially charged with domestic violence and assault. He would remain in custody until his court hearing. I leaned back against my pillow, staring at the ceiling. The pain was still there, but for the first time, it wasn't just physical. It was the pain of breaking free from something I had let control me for too long. Nicholas had been taken away, and for the first time I was no longer his prisoner. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital. My face was still healing, but the pain from Nicholas's slap was nothing compared to the years of emotional wounds he had inflicted. With my parents by my side, I met my lawyer, Evelyn Dawson. She was sharp, confident, and had no patience for men like Nicholas. We have a solid case, Isabella, she assured me, flipping through the files. The security footage, medical reports, and witness statements leave no room for doubt. He's going to pay for what he's done. Hearing those words gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For so long, Nicholas had made me feel powerless. But now, the law was on my side. The trial began 2 weeks later. As I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounded. Nicholas sat at the defendant's table, his once proud posture now stiff with tension. He still tried to glare at me, but I refused to look away. Evelyn presented our case with unshakable confidence. The hospital security footage played on the screen, showing Nicholas slapping me while I was helpless in bed. The nurse and security guard testified, confirming how aggressive and threatening he was. My medical records proved the extent of my injuries, both from his attack and from the neglect I had suffered under him. Nicholas's lawyer tried to spin the narrative. It was a moment of frustration, he argued. He was just upset seeing his wife in the hospital. Evelyn wasn't having it. A moment of frustration, she repeated, her voice firm. Nicholas Walker entered that hospital room, verbally assaulted his wife, and physically struck her while she was recovering from a life-threatening infection. That is not frustration. That is abuse. The judge didn't hesitate. "Mr. Walker," he said sternly, "you are found guilty of domestic violence and aggravated assault." A hush fell over the courtroom. Nicholas clenched his jaw as the sentence was read aloud. 5 years in prison. No chance of parole. Full financial compensation for my medical expenses. I exhaled deeply. It was over. The man who had controlled me for years was finally being held accountable. As the guards led Nicholas away, he turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this, Isabella." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "No, Nicholas. I regret staying with you for as long as I did." He was taken away, and I was free. As Nicholas was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, a strange sense of finality settled over me. For years, I had lived in his shadow, enduring his manipulation, cruelty, and abuse. But now, he was the one trapped, behind bars, facing the consequences of his actions. I let out a slow breath, my fingers gripping the edge of the courtroom bench. My parents sat beside me, their hands clasped in silent relief. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The court had not only sentenced Nicholas to 5 years in prison, but he was also ordered to pay for all my medical expenses. It was a small victory, but an important one. I would no longer suffer because of him. As the courtroom emptied, Evelyn Dawson, my lawyer, turned to me with a rare smile. "Justice has been served, Isabella," she said. "You did this. You stood up for yourself." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had been powerless, bending under Nicholas's control. But now I had taken my life back. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, sensing the weight of the case. I didn't stop to talk. I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for peace. That night, I sat alone in my parents' guest room, staring out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, but all I could feel was the quiet relief of knowing Nicholas could never hurt me again. For years, I had convinced myself that leaving him was impossible, that he was too powerful, too controlling. But in the end, he was just a man. A weak man who had built his strength by tearing me down. And now, he was gone. I wasn't naive enough to think the scars, both physical and emotional, would disappear overnight. But I knew this. I had survived him, and that meant I could survive anything. The morning after the trial, I woke up in my parents' home, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. There was no tension in the air, no fear of hearing Nicholas's sharp words or feeling his cold presence. For the first time in a long time, I was safe. My mother brought me a cup of coffee and sat beside me at the kitchen table. She studied me for a moment before speaking. "What's next for you, Isabella?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. For so long, my life had been about surviving Nicholas. Now that he was gone, I had to figure out who I was without him. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I do know I'm never letting anyone control me again." That day, I made a decision. I would rebuild my life, on my own terms. The first step was therapy. I needed to understand why I had stayed with Nicholas for so long and how to heal from the years of emotional abuse. My therapist, Dr. Reed, listened patiently as I unraveled my past. "Abuse isn't just physical, Isabella," she said one day. "Nicholas made you doubt yourself. He convinced you that you were nothing without him. But look at you now, you're standing on your own." She was right. For years, I had let Nicholas define my worth. Now, I was taking that power back. The next step was getting back to work. I had given up my career as an event planner because Nicholas had wanted me to be a full-time homemaker. Now, I was going to do what I loved again. I started small, taking a few freelance projects. At first, I was nervous. Had I lost my skills after all these years? But the moment I started planning my first event again, something inside me clicked. I hadn't lost myself. I had just been buried under years of control. With each project, my confidence grew. Clients loved my work, and soon, I was receiving more requests than I could handle. I was finally back in control of my own life. One evening, While journaling about my experiences, a thought crossed my mind. What if I share my story? There were so many women out there, trapped in relationships like mine, believing they had no way out. What if my story could help them? That night, I started a blog. I wrote about my journey, my healing, and how I found the strength to leave. To my surprise, women from all over the country started reaching out. Your story gave me hope. I'm in the same situation. How did you leave? Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. Reading their messages, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was helping others do the same. Months passed, and I finally moved into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, it was all chosen by me, not by Nicholas. One evening, I sat on my balcony, sipping tea and watching the sunset. Nicholas had once told me I'd never survive without him. But here I was, not just surviving, but thriving. And for the first time in years, I was truly free. Moving into my own apartment felt surreal. For years, Nicholas had controlled every part of my life, what I wore, who I talked to, how I spent my time. Now, every decision was mine alone. As I unpacked boxes, I realized how little I had brought with me. Most of my belongings had been tied to my past life, and I didn't want them anymore. This was a fresh start. I decorated the space slowly, filling it with things that brought me joy: soft curtains, warm lights, bookshelves lined with novels I had once loved but abandoned during my marriage. This wasn't just an apartment. It was proof that I had reclaimed my life. I kept up with therapy, continuing to untangle the emotional scars Nicholas had left behind. "You're learning to trust yourself again," Dr. Reed told me one day. "That's the most powerful thing you can do." She was right. I had spent years doubting myself, believing that I needed Nicholas to survive. Now I knew better. With each passing day, I grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The nightmares of my past began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of peace. My blog had grown beyond what I expected. More and more women reached out, sharing their own stories of abuse and survival. One day, I received an email from a woman named Rachel. "I read your story, and it gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband. I'm scared, but I know I deserve better. Thank you for showing me that there is life after abuse." Tears welled in my eyes. This was bigger than me. I decided to take things a step further. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others who had escaped abusive relationships. For the first time, I had found my true purpose. Nicholas tried to reach out once. A letter from prison arrived in my mailbox. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. He was part of my past, and that's where he would stay. Instead of looking back, I focused on my future. One evening, as I cooked dinner in my cozy apartment, I looked around and smiled. No fear. No tension. No walking on eggshells. Just peace, freedom, and happiness. Nicholas had once told me, "You'll regret this, Isabella." But sitting there, in a home that was truly mine, I knew the truth. I didn't regret leaving. I only regretted not leaving sooner. And with that, I closed the final chapter of my old life and embraced the new one ahead. Thank you for following Isabella's journey. If you found her story inspiring, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of strength and hope.